Okay, welcome to the April 3rd, 2012 meeting of the City Council of Littleton, Colorado. Roll call, please.
Mayor Brinkman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stallman.
Here.
Councilmember Beckman.
Here.
Councilmember Cernanik.
Present.
Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Present.
Councilmember Valdez.
Present.
And will our Boy Scout troop please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Well done, guys. Thank you.
That was a good one. I wonder what his room looks like. Okay, and are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chairman, there's a proclamation to be read almost immediately after I do this. And also for some folks that may have seen a earlier posting of the agenda for the evening, pay attention to items 11B and 11C. Their sequence is 11B is on powers and duties, and 11C is on the process for approval.
Thank you. Is the agenda with changes, any objections? Okay, it is approved. And Councilmember Cernanik, do you want to read the proclamation, please?
Yes, this is a proclamation of the City of Littleton, Colorado, proclaiming April 2012 Depot Art Center and Gallery Month in the City of Littleton. Whereas the Depot Art Center and Gallery will mark the 50th anniversary of the Littleton Fine Arts Guild, formed in 1962 to encourage artistic development in the community, and whereas the Guild is organized to provide members of the community opportunities for artistic development, to promote and encourage qualified instruction and education in fine arts, to sponsor exhibits, to maintain the fine art gallery known as the Depot Art Center and Gallery, and to make contributions to the cultural life of the City of Littleton and the state of Colorado. And whereas a reception for the 50th anniversary show will be held on Saturday, April 14th, 2012, from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., featuring both the choristers and the boy choir from Young Voices of Colorado, under the direction of Margie Camp and Paul Smith, respectively. And whereas Guild members will demonstrate their work on the following two Saturdays, April 21st and 28th, from noon until 2 p.m., and whereas longtime members of the Littleton Fine Arts Guild, some of whom are in their 90s, will be honored at a private tea on April 12th, 2012, and whereas the 50th anniversary show, juried by Nancy Wiley, runs from April 4 to May 13th, now, therefore, I, Debbie Brinkman, Mayor of the City of Littleton, do hereby recognize and value the high quality and 50-year contribution of the Depot Art Center and Gallery to the City of Littleton and the state of Colorado, and encourage all citizens to participate in Depot Art Center and Gallery Month and their planned activities. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of Littleton to be affixed this third day of April 2012.
Do we have anybody from the depot who wants to come down? Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, let's move to approval of the minutes of the regular meeting from March 20th. Are there any changes aside from any non-substantive changes that may have been submitted to the clerk?
Yes, Mayor. I have one change on March 20th, 2012. On line 234, Mayor Brinkman voted no on that ordinance, so it should read motion carried 4-3.
Thank you. Any others?
Yes, just a second. Page 12. I had thought in around on page 12, I thought that Councilmember Beckman had suggested something that's not included here, and City Clerk did check, and Council did not give direction on that item about the posting of whatever evaluation tool that we did, if you remember. And I thought we had some kind of head nodding agreement, but we did not formally agree to do that. So didn't we? And if we didn't, then I'd like us to address that at some time.
My recollection was, as is yours, there was no council decision made. There was head nodding on the part of the city manager and the city attorney that they didn't see a problem with the idea of once the evaluations were established in executive session, that the actual evaluation that the city manager would be judged by could be a public document.
So
And so we don't have a council action.
we didn't have council action, but if we had that kind of recognition of that, I'm wondering, should that be in some way in the minutes?
Wendy, can you go back and add
Certainly.
a note on that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else?
Not on that, no.
Okay. Those changes, those are approved. Minutes of the special meeting of March 27th. Aside from any non-substantive changes that have been given to the clerk, are there any additionals?
I have a few. On the first page, it says Littleton City Council met in special session. We actually met in study session, as the first page shows, then special session. And I've raised this issue before, but I think it needs to say both in there, like study session / special session. But it does present a problem in the way these are listed online, as I said before. So if somebody's trying to find study sessions and somebody's trying to find special sessions, when we have minutes that are combined this way for one meeting, you really can't do that unless you know you're looking for a combined meeting. And I had suggested that we have them listed separately and that we approve the minutes separately. So it's something I'm asking us to figure out how we do. Then on page 2, line approximately, 35, 36, Council Taylor expressed interest in expanding the opt-in area and to include both areas, both north and south of Main Street, specifically Powers to Little's Creek, because he did specify those. And then 37, Cole agreed and then add, but suggested moving this, the south boundary to the north side of Church Street. So insert that part, and I have given this already to the city clerk, so if you all are agreeing, she knows that that's the wording. And then on page 3, line 73, to be more specific, Cole expressed interest in having the former elementary school and the main building at ACC considered for landmark designation. And then insert HPB Chair Koenig agreed and said he knew who to contact at ACC.
Are there any other changes?
And let me make sure. Then I think the city clerk is changing somehow. Maybe she would tell us on page 4. It says Brinkman took a vote and noted there were 4 votes for the HPB recommendation, but we did not take a vote. So,
It just wasn't a formal vote.
right.
I
Well,
can
but-
change the word if you'd like me to.
Well, if we took a vote,
took a
then
poll.
we need the name, so, thank you.
And Wendy, would you take a look at a way to delineate between the study and the special on the occasions that we do that?
Yes, ma'am.
And bring us some recommendations. Thank you. Any other changes on those?
Thank you.
They're approved with changes. Okay. City manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. One, just a heads up, starting on the April 17th meeting, you will see a new council communication. It'll actually be titled Agenda Communication with some new paragraph headers, so stay tuned for that. This is a preview. I attended the CALIA conference with Chief Coogan last week, and I was very impressed with CALIA in general. I know Councilman Taylor has attended that, and Councilman Beckman in his former life was CALIA from the city of Littleton. But I can tell you it was a very impressive organization. It is by no means a rubber stamp. They are a very thorough group, and I thought Sean Dugan and Chief Heather Coogan did a very admirable job. I had an opportunity to speak before the commission, but the two of those staffers did the yeoman's work. I just got to be there and show the support, and I spent a few moments talking about how I could see the CALIA standards setting the bar for the entire organization. So it was an honor to be there, and once we receive once we get the award, we'll have a formal presentation before the council. And last but not least, tonight is 6 months, if you can believe it already, that I have been employed
But
as
who's
your
counting?
city manager. Me. So it's kind of like dating. Pretty soon we won't be counting. Thank you.
I don't have anything. Thank you. Councilmember Cole?
Last Wednesday, City Attorney Crawford and I attended an excellent presentation on improvement districts, and I emailed you all today a link so you can access that yourself if you would like, but really outstanding presentation on the 3 types of improvement districts. And, of course, the question-answer session clarified a few things for people, but that was really good. Then last week, we seem to have used a different procedure for study sessions. We had something scheduled at 7 or starting at 6:30, and then at 8. And when we got to 8, we just cut that off. Is that going to be our new procedure to hold to a hard timeline? Because in the past, sometimes we've gone 2 hours over the allotted time. So I'm just wanting to know what kind of procedure we're looking at.
Mayor, I can speak to at least the initial part of that. Councilmember Cole, was we had guests coming.
Right.
And so that was primarily where when we were looking at the agenda, we didn't want the guests coming in to not
Okay.
have a start
And
time. But I think in
thought
general,
so.
it's not intended to, it is a study session and be more free-flowing.
But when
Obviously,
we
we'll
have the
work with-
special guest, okay.
Yes,
yeah.
that's
I just
the
wanted to
intent.
clarify publicly, because a couple people had also asked me about it, and thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, when we had quite a few people invited for that, and I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
and just so the council knows, as a general rule, we try to put invited guests first on anything that we're doing so that they're not waiting around for other agenda items. We do that when we look at the overall agenda and certainly on study sessions. That one, as the council knows, we had the tour first, so we couldn't do that. But as a general rule, we will always be respectful of invited guests and try to get them in and out so they can get on with their lives. So thank you for the question.
And then this is not meant to suggest anything bad, but since our city manager and city attorney are both at or just past their 6-month being with us, although one acting and one acting up, teasing. I am wondering, because we have discussed having 6-month evaluations, and so I'm just wondering when that process is going to be.
I'll be working with the mayor and getting those scheduled because that is in both of our contracts. So
Thank you.
We'll get it
And
going.
I cannot remember when we discussed these. Are we inviting citizen input?
We did not discuss inviting citizen input. I don't know that you had ultimately made a decision about who, for the 6-month or the more formal one at the year basis, how you want to do that. But at some point, we'll have that discussion. But
Thank you all.
you're welcome.
Jim?
Actually, all of my report tonight's going to be about Dr.Cog.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. Dr. Cog is doing an aerial photography for the 7,000 square miles around the Denver metro region, and cities can buy into that if we want a new map of updated aerial photography. Just contact Dr. Cog and get on the list to buy what portion of it that you'd like to have. And do our firemen go through the fire training program at Dr. Cog? I don't remember whether they do or not.
I cannot answer that. I can find out and let you know, though.
Okay, because I think there's some talk about doing away with if we don't get enough participation to continue doing it, which is what we had to do with the police training that we used to do and police testing. So, but right now they're still testing potential firemen. We had a presentation at our board meeting last week about urban simulation. It's a land use model that's going to help us with our 2040 Metro Vision plan that's coming up. And there's a whole lot of what-if scenarios that can play out on this. But it's kind of trying to predict the future. And it's based upon, it's better to get the future imprecisely right rather than to get the future precisely wrong.
Are you supposed to say, think about it?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're doing a kickoff on June 7th after there's a listening tour that'll be going on between now and then with all the communities in the metro area. And the last item is save the date for Wednesday, May the 2nd. It's going to be the annual awards, biannual awards program, going to be at History Colorado Museum. It'll be open. You can wander all the floors and all the exhibits. There will be food stations scattered throughout the museum, and starting at 6 o'clock, 7:15 there'll be the awards presentation. So you will all get an invite if you haven't already. That's it.
Thank you. Bruce?
Thank you, Mayor. 3 pretty quick things. I attended the Fire Protection District board meeting on the 26th of March. They've got a new website up and running that they haven't had before. They're pretty fired up about littletonfireprotectiondistrict.org, and they're trying to expand the capacity of that and make it more user-friendly. There was, interestingly, in an example of how the partners are doing, I think, taking some positive steps forward in terms of operating jointly together. The partners agreed to swap the Ladder 16 vehicle for Engine 18. So essentially they moved the ladder truck from Station 16 down to Station 18, which is on Highlands Ranch, and ran the engine from 18 up to 16. It's not a ladder truck. And the reason that was done was for operational efficiencies, subject to the results of a study that all 3 of the partners did together. Interestingly, there was some cost differentials between the equipment, as in the partners paid for the ladder truck a third, each picking up a third, whereas the ranch paid for the entire engine 18, and so there was some disparity going back and forth there, but they all agreed to do it because it was the right thing to do from an operational standpoint. So I think that's a very positive. step forward. Likewise, on the engine 13 lease, the new engine 13 that's going in, the city's desire to lease this vehicle necessitated that it be titled 100% in the city's name, notwithstanding that essentially 50% ownership is with the fire protection district. But the district wanted to pay cash, and so essentially the finance departments worked all of that out, and the district ultimately agreed to allow the city to title it 100%. Quid pro quo, the city's assuming liability exposure from an insurance perspective on the thing 100%. But again, I think these are all just, they're sort of administrative to a certain extent, but they do demonstrate the fact that it's a strong partnership, that people are working together to solve and figure out operational issues, and it's, in my opinion, a very positive step forward for not only the city, but as well as the district and the ranch. I wanted to, I guess, again, just remind everyone, sort of, again, a save the date kind of thing. The third annual Epic Spring Cleaning event will be held on April 28th to benefit Interfaith Community Services and our thrift stores. The Home Depot parking lot at Bellevue and Federal from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Bring your household goods, clothing, certainly bring food for Interfaith as well. And the charities will divvy up what's donated and make sure folks with developmental disabilities and those who are in need of help get that support. And as I say this, whenever I make this, I am actually a full-time employee of ARC Thrift Stores, but I do not benefit whatsoever in any way financially or otherwise from this particular activity. It's just a community event for the community. Last thing I wanted to do was I had sent an email to Michael this afternoon, and there's been a fair amount of information floating around regarding the nutrient regulations with respect to the sewer plant. We don't have to do this now in deference to time crunch, but at some point I think just something of an ongoing report, maybe when, Michael, you do your report as to status updates. There's nothing new. There's a big meeting in May with the Water Quality Commission, as I understand it. And our people, in terms of the attorneys and whatnot at the sewer plant, are on top of the strategy for addressing the issues that are hanging out there. But given the order of magnitude involved, it's something that I think bears certainly a lot of communication as far as the citizens are concerned. Go ahead. You have.
We could just do a short memo and put it in the packet, so that could probably do it. So we can identify some of the information that's in there and get that out in the next council meeting's packet.
That's fine. And I don't want to make this necessarily, don't want to go over the top on it, but on the other hand, no pun intended, it's a relatively fluid situation. So, and with that.
Jerry?
We're starting to back up, Bruce. Last month, I had mentioned that, briefly mentioned that Coach Ray Barron, high school wrestling coach at Heritage High School, how he had received an award at the Colorado State Wrestling Championship that I attended, as usual. And for his more than 40 years of wrestling as a wrestling coach, I received an email from Mr. Paul Bingham, who had mentioned also a piece of information on there, that Coach Barron was also inducted into the Wrestling Hall of Fame for the country, located in Oklahoma. And I think that's quite an honor for Coach Barron, but I think for the city of Littleton and certainly Heritage High School, it is fantastic they have a coach like Ray Barron. That's it.
Attended the South Suburban Park and Rec District board meeting last week. A reminder that our next Tuesday meeting, we're going to be meeting with the board and some of the staff members from South Suburban. They're prepping for that. The footnote is it may be 6-month anniversary, but we are 5 weeks away from the South Suburban Park and Rec District election, which is on May 8th. Voting centers that are here in the Littleton area include the Littleton Golf and Tennis, the Buck Center, and as well as the Goodson Center, which is over on University. The polls will be open between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. If you so choose otherwise to apply for a mail-in ballot, contact the administrative offices on University. The next Economic Development Group meeting of the Chamber is on the 13th, and footnote given our Parks and Open Space Task Force is there will be presentations from a couple of developers leveraging parks and open space and integrating those into the community. The Legislative Action Committee of the Chamber is meeting at the Capitol next Tuesday. The Healthcare Task Force is meeting this Thursday, when some of the focus there in both sessions is dealing with some of the state legislation as it impacts employers and businesses particularly. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce?
I don't have anything to report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have no listed guest appearances, no scheduled public appearances, so this is an opportunity at this point for any unscheduled public appearances. An unscheduled appearance is an opportunity for any citizen to express an opinion or ask questions regarding city services, council policies, or other matters of community concern that are not part of the scheduled agenda. We do have 3 first reading public hearings this evening, so if you want to address any of those issues, please wait until the public hearing opportunity. Is there anybody that would like to come down and address council? Norm? Please state your name and address, please.
Good evening, council and staff. My name is Norman Brown. I live a couple blocks south of the Stern Park muckraking at 6081. It's appropriate in an election year. And actually, thank you for getting that addressed in the terms of water treatment. Anaerobic digestion that occurs on the hot summer days is not pleasant. Just because I walk in that area with the dogs. I've got several things. I'll try to string them together with appropriate segues. They're under the heading of management concerns. Let me start with some things that I appreciate that have changed recently. I like the first and second readings, the way you have them scheduled now, the council reports as well at the beginning, and I will try to be succinct as most of you were. First thing that I list as a concern, there was a list, and I've got a copy of it here. I'll put it on the overhead in a moment. City Council study session district meeting follow-up items. And that was sort of a to-do list, who had been assigned what. I'll make a reference to a couple months ago when there was a suggestion from Ray Koenig about naming the museum to honor Bob McQuarrie, who was very instrumental in getting historic preservation started in this town and preserving a lot of heritage at the museum. That's the kind of thing that would have appeared on this list. I don't know who it's assigned to. I don't know if it gets, I suspect it doesn't, but it could possibly get a de facto whatever, or other items that come before you at these different meetings. This is a point of contact between the city and the citizens in the particular, and also for people that weren't involved in that issue but heard him make that suggestion and kind of wonder, well, what's going on? So that's something that I was sorry to see go away. Second is something that was actually referred to earlier by Dr. Cole. I attended the council workshop earlier. In the morning, I thought time management was a problem. The presentation was about District 2, and you had a lot of guests. I'll relate that to the study session of last week where there was, I guess, a hard break at 8 o'clock because you had the historic preservation coming in. I think the latter was much better. At the council workshop, the presentations kind of went on, and what I would have been interested to hear was a discussion among council members regarding, well, what should we do, what could we do, what might we do, and there was none of that. It was almost like a travelogue, come see that. Chris Gibbons does a great job, and the rest of the staff, and several of the guests, the doctor's care people, did a great job of presenting what is going on, what's been done, but there was really no time left for, it ran long, and there was no time left for discussion among council. So I would say seemingly that has improved the time management aspect. Third thing I wanted to address, and I understand it's on the first reading tonight, and I'm not speaking to it, I'm speaking about it. The planning commissioners last week, also last Monday, were asked for a recommendation to you to give you regarding the PDO process. I thought that the staff brought forward an incomplete piece, and the commissioners, by a vote of 4-3, seemed to agree. I should know the commissioners are very highly analytical, and there wasn't the scope of or the detail in that presentation, I thought, from staff. There were references to other areas, specifically the DRC, that haven't been solidified. There was nothing there. They simply referred to it. There's going to be changes there. This part refers to that, but we don't know what's coming forward there. Again, this is a small piece. The commissioners really didn't have the information to be analytical at that point. You should watch the video and you can decide for yourselves. The other thing that concerns me a little bit, and the agenda is amended for tonight, and I haven't had a chance to look at everything regarding that, the two things regarding the Planning Commission now. But there's seemingly a disregard, and you heard it from one of the commissioners who chose not to ask to be reappointed, from management. And that's painting with a broad brush, and I understand that's probably not fair. But get it into the city charter if the role of the Planning Commission has changed. If it has not changed, then respect it. That's my suggestion. This leads into the HP board meeting. I thought staff did a good, their presentation, I should say, with you at the study session. I thought staff had a well-prepared presentation. Unfortunately, as came up a couple times, it seemed to replow old ground. Once again, I don't support any form of non-consensual designation. The discussion involved a couple aspects. First, my property rights need to be respected by having your property come up to standards that I like. That is akin to the old saw of when you're swinging your fist, your right ends when it gets close to me, when it hits me. Okay, your property rights can't lap over the property line onto my property, in my opinion. The other thing, and this some of you have heard before, most of you know I was involved with the Friends of Historic Fort Logan for many years. We acquired a grant from the state historic fund back when money was available, and had a survey done for a historic district on the grounds of Fort Logan. During this discussion last week, a couple times the comment was made, well, who wouldn't be in favor of designation? The Administration of Health and Human Services that manages the grounds of Fort Logan was not in favor of that. And they told us after the survey was done and the district was being proposed, don't go any farther with this. And it was clear to us, because we had a very beneficial lease there, and that since has been updated as well. It's still a very good situation, but it was made clear that we shouldn't pursue this. And so if the state, one agency, really doesn't want to be bothered and doesn't want any form of designation, how much more reasonable is it for a private individual to say, I don't want the city to come in and designate me? It's just a freedom that I think we should be able to enjoy. I was hopeful, and I lobbied for the state to allow a historic district over there, but they didn't. And so it's anecdotal, but I think you see my point, and that's all I have tonight. I hope I got it in 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. Anybody else? Seeing no one, we will move to our consent agenda. And Kirsten?
This is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Littleton, Colorado, amending the lease between the City of Littleton and Stanton Dodge.
Council, in 1999, the city purchased the Chambers property located at Bowles and Lowell Boulevard. It turned into open space, which is now known as Winnetka Ponds Park property. In 2003, the city entered into a lease with Mr. Dodge for a barn located on the property to house his horses. And in the original lease, Mr. Dodge provided the insurance for the barn through his insurer provider. Recently, his insurance company notified him they will no longer cover the barn until he's asked the city to use CIRSA for coverage, and he will pay the premium. We actually own the barn. The current annual cost of insurance coverage for the barn is $515. The cost will adjust annually based on an annual rate, and any increases shall be paid by Mr. Dodge.
So I'm going to pull that.
You're pulling it?
Yeah.
Okay. That has been pulled. And I will remind council that the policy question on this particular agenda item is whether or not council will continue the lease given the proposed new term, specifically that the city provide coverage under a reimbursement provision. Councilmember Cole?
Yes, I have a few questions, so one of you will answer. Does the city have any use itself for that barn?
No.
No, okay. And how does he intend to use the barn?
My understanding is he's currently not using it right now. He had a previous tenant that had horses in there. That tenant, I believe, I'm going to say recently, although I can't define the term. He's got another tenant in the house that is focused on doing some renovation work on the house itself. And so I think, at least on the short-term basis, that there is no current activity within the barn itself. This is, we are in year 9 of a 10-year lease, and so there's not an interest on his part to end that lease. He wants to continue to have the option to use it. And if I may, part of this is, I think it's good public policy. We own the barn, and under that general premise, we would, as the landlord, retain insurance on it. So I'm not sure how the policy decision was made previously for the leasee to have insurance, but I think the shift is good public policy from that perspective.
Okay, well, I'll follow with two questions related to that. I'd just like to wrap my head around these things. Section 14, or whatever we call item 14 on page 4, seems to indemnify the city for just about everything imaginable, except maybe a meteor falling on it or whatever, but I'm not totally sure that's true. So if for example, someone got into the barn, maybe somebody was looking for a place to sleep or whatever, got injured, maybe killed, what is that kind of thing covered by this too?
Yes, precisely.
Okay, because I couldn't quite place that one in there, but okay. And then fourth, since we're using our CIRSA connection to do this, have we checked with CIRSA?
That's the first thing we did.
Okay,
And, yeah,
but didn't say that in here. And so do we have that in writing? I didn't think it did. If it said it didn't say in a way that I understood that, so.
Well, we did talk to CIRSA about the coverage, and they said no problem. We wouldn't have been able to do it without them, so. Anytime
so
we
they-
look
so
at insuring an interest,
I guess what
we
I'm
have to-
trying, since we had a couple of issues not too long ago with what we were doing with CIRSA, I'm just wanting to make sure we have on record legally that they're approving this.
This will be, yes, this will be included in our list of covered items. And so you can rest assured that CIRSA will be covering us, and we'll have it in writing. And I want, the dollar amount is the pass-through dollar amount, so that came from CIRSA.
No, and I appreciate that.
So they are fully.
But do they know that potentially it could be used by horses?
Yes.
Or that somebody might get in there because we're not nearby to have anybody looking?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just,
They talked directly with Mr. Dodge. CIRSA did.
yeah, well, it's not my concern about the talking, it's a concern about whether there's something legally in writing, and so that's all I'm asking, to
Yeah,
be
we've got it.
reassured. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, need a motion?
I will move to approve the resolution amending the lease with Stanton Dodge.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Bruce?
Just one question, taking it from a different point of view. Why would we expect Mr. Dodge to pick up any additional costs as they are applied in future years if it's our building?
Well, he's going to pay the actual cost. Is that what your question is?
Well,
so if there's an increase to 525 next year, that's what we'll bill him, is the 525. Is that?
Then I misunderstood. I thought that any subsequent increases would be paid for by Mr. Dodge.
Yes.
Okay.
Isn't that what I said?
Well, yeah, I'm just thinking if it's a city building, the city should pay for 100% of it, not have that expectation of him.
Oh, that's a separate policy question of whether you want to pass through the cost of insuring the building to the renter.
It's part of the lease agreement.
Yeah, as part of the lease agreement. Yes or no? I mean, I'm just looking at it from a different point of view.
Yeah, I think the intent here was he had been paying as part of the original intent from 9 years ago, now covering that insurance. There was both a policy change, but it was initiated because his insurance company was no longer going to operate as it had. And to keep the approach the same, it was, well, we haven't incurred that cost in the past, so we'll let him do it. It's obviously $515 is not a substantial amount, and if it's the desire of the council not to charge him for that and just have that on our asset and coverage list by CIRSA, that's certainly an approach you can take.
Okay, I'm not trying, I'm just asking the question. I don't want to change the motion.
Yep, it's very much a policy question of the council. We did just move forward with how we'd been doing it in the past.
Yeah, having been in the neighborhood, my recollection is it was all part of the lease negotiation to leave the building standing.
And that gets to Councilmember Cole's question about is there a use or does it have value?
Right. The property owner of the piece that was contiguous that's, has it within it's all part of the lease agreement.
Okay, any more discussion? Ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Okay, moving to ordinances on first reading and public hearings. Our first one, Kirsten.
This is an ordinance of the City of Littleton, Colorado, amending City Code Section 10-4-4, subsection B 2.5, pertaining to the maximum number of chicken hens permitted in the R1, R2, R3, and RE zone districts.
Council, in 2010, we adopted ordinance number 4, Series 2010, permitting 4 chicken hens in residential single-family zone districts. Councilmember Cole requested an ordinance that would increase the number of chicken hens permitted in the aforementioned districts to 6. Staff has also received inquiries requesting additional chickens for the purpose of increasing the number of eggs produced to more adequately feed a family. Generally, a hen lays 1 egg a day. This is a public hearing. We'll start with Glenn giving us some background.
Well, thank you, Mayor and council members. I think you pretty much hit the high points, really. This was adopted by council originally in 2010. With the number of chickens, there's also a number of standards as far as the size of the chicken enclosure, how close that can be to the property, and the property owner has to maintain the property as far as odor and what have you. None of those standards change. We're just increasing the number from 4 to 6 hens. As the mayor mentioned, the purpose is to provide a little bit additional sustainability to a household as far as producing their own food, and we estimate that it could average about 42 eggs a week. So we think that's reasonable. Planning Commission reviewed this at their last Planning Commission meeting. They recommended approval by a vote of 4 to 3, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions council might have.
Council, any questions for Glenn? Phil?
Barry can go first.
Jerry?
Go ahead, Phil.
Phil?
That's fine. Glenn, do we have any knowledge at the city level of the number of folks that currently have 4 egg-laying hens?
I don't believe we have a census of the number of eggs.
So at this point in time, there's no registry in that?
No, we don't.
Okay, and my recollection is the ordinance as we passed it doesn't require any approval or acknowledgement by neighboring properties. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and how many complaints has anyone in the city received over the past 2 years with regard coyotes and foxes?
We went back and took a look at for code compliance as far as the number of complaints regarding chickens, and
No, I said complaints regarding coyotes and or foxes.
That I could not answer for you.
Okay, I know I have received probably more than most anything else. I've received complaints about wild animals. So, has the staff completed any research with regard coops or housing that hen-laying chickens would be appropriate for them, that would be predator-proof as well as humane?
My understanding was that was looked at in detail with the original ordinance, and the result is what we have from 2010.
Okay, and that having done some of that research myself, there is no commercially available housing that is declared predator-proof. Thank you.
Jerry?
Just briefly in the background, it mentions that you received a number of inquiries requesting the increase. How many folks have called to request an increase?
I personally have received 2 since I've been here since May, and I believe we've probably received another 3 as far as staff.
Oh, 5 maybe.
So 5.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Bruce?
5 discrete residences?
It's just 5 parties that asked about the numbers of chickens that are allowed.
Okay, so I guess, speaking plainly, we're not talking about a particular, I mean, the question ends up being how broadly based is this issue across the community, or is it very narrow to 1 or 2 residences?
Right, well, I couldn't answer that
Okay.
for you.
Bruce?
Oh,
do you have another question?
yeah, I actually did have one. Glenn, it says here on your conflicts and or complications that the code compliance staff has not received any calls regarding noise, odor, so forth and so on. Doesn't that sort of, if you believe at some level too many chickens could theoretically constitute a nuisance, doesn't that sort of imply that 4 is not a bad number when it comes to avoiding nuisance issues?
You could make that connection, I guess. Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Wait a minute, would you explain your logic on that?
If 4 were a nuisance, they'd be getting code complaints, but 4 isn't a nuisance, so if the ordinance is working as indicated, why do we need to change it?
What does that have to do with nuisance if we haven't,
No code issues. My assumption is at some point you get too many chickens, you're going to get code compliance issues. Or there's going to be nuisance for the other residencies, the other neighbors.
Well, the nuisance would come how? I have an idea, but how do you see nuisance?
Noise, odor, so forth and so on.
So odor comes from, and you get rid of that by, so if, I know people who have lots of dogs and there's a lot of odor from that. So,
Okay.
But if people clean things up, I know other people have a lot of dogs, and there's no odor.
Well, I guess, how do you want to do this?
Well, I think we'll go ahead, and we can save this for the discussion later. We're just doing questions at this point. Bruce?
Can you tell me, I know you weren't here, but has your research told you why 4 was the magic number in 2010 and how that was arrived at as being the appropriate number? Because that's not that long ago that we should be making the change now.
I believe what we did at the time is we looked at our adjoining communities in the Denver metro area, and that seemed to be a number that fell kind of in the middle. We've done that again and given you some numbers that are basically on both ends of the range. In fact, I think since we adopted our ordinance, Denver has actually adopted an ordinance that allows, I believe, 8. So that's, I think, what was our reasoning for arriving at 4.
Glenn, if I can add to that, one of the other considerations that we had was we had a number of people who came down who wanted to have the chickens, and we were talking to them about the quantities, and they had indicated that 4, in terms of the way that you raise chickens and how they are productive, that 4 was almost a minimum number for them. So that also figured into our consideration.
But that was not unanimous testimony we got
No.
tonight either.
Any other questions for Glenn? Thank you, Glenn. At this point, I will open the public hearing. If anybody wants to come down, I don't have a register. If anybody signed up to speak, Norm?
I had a question on the financials, too. I don't know when, at what point.
Okay, when we close the public, we'll go back.
I didn't sign up, but again, Norm Brown, 6081 South Spotswood Street. I was on the Planning Commission when this was originally considered, and then there's a couple elements that addresses some of the questions about predators. It was somewhat arbitrary as far as the number, but we felt that, much as Dr. Cole was stating, any animal that is not tended to and the yard cleaned could lead to a problem with odor, or particularly with, in the case of dogs, there are disease elements if the place isn't kept cleaned up. We also have discussed this in context of the doggy daycare and things like that. So it does come up. It's dealt with basically by dealing with a nuisance, not whether or not they have a particular kind of animal there, chickens or dogs or whatever. As far as predators, we discussed at length also trying to ensure that people had not predator proof, but a reasonable level of security for the chicken hens. I think the term providing a drive-through for the foxes was not what we wanted to see happen. That can be very ugly. In the 30 years approximately that I've lived just south of Stern Park, I've got 2 big dogs. They were bred to protect flocks of sheep from wolves, so we aren't too concerned about foxes or coyotes. We've had both. Coyotes follow us. On a Christmas day when I was walking a dog years ago, we turned around, and I never let my dogs off the leash, but we jogged along, and of course the coyote disappeared in the dust. No way to keep up. The thing that we see most often is in Stern Park is a fox carrying a house cat, and people let their house cats out, and that's where a lot of the provision, if you've got your house cats and you let them out at night, I see the signs in the park about every 2 months, have you seen fill in the blank, and my house cat is missing, particularly when the foxes are raising their young. The cats think that they're the top of the food chain, and they find out very brutally they're not. So that's a consideration, I think. The other thing that happens, of course, in Stern Park is occasionally a fox or a coyote gets one of the geese, and that's just as well. It's nature's way, unfortunately. But I would support this at some level. Too many hens is too many hens, but you deal with the person's behavior if they're not taking care of them We, of course, dealt with the racing pigeons and in that discussion, because they're quite an investment. The people that keep those are very diligent. Disease creates quite a problem for them. So again, you've got to clean up after your animals, whether it's horses, dogs, chickens. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. Anybody else? Okay, I close the public hearing, and I need a motion.
So I need to read 3 that I received by email, if that's okay? So, and I can give these into the public
Are
record?
these people who wanted their emails read into the public record?
Yes, I asked them, yes.
Okay.
So, one person lives next to one of the people that did ask me when I was campaigning. This is Macy Dorff. I live next to John Hershey, and I never had any problems with his chickens, and I am in favor of increasing from 4 to 6. Macy Dorff, 6465 South Prince Street. One from Amy Whitehorn. I support increasing the number of backyard chickens to 6. I heard this was a topic to be covered tonight. And then Anna Stewart, who lives at 444 West Tacoma Drive. And I don't know quite how this person said she got my email, because I didn't send an email on this. Somebody contacted me. But anyway, I got your email from a friend, I think she maybe means email address, who was sending me the information about the upcoming discussion about chickens tonight at the council meeting. I just wanted to send my support as you pursue raising the limit from 4 to 6. We are proud owners of 4 beautiful hens that have brought joy and delicious eggs to our family. My husband and I have 4 children ranging in age from 1 to 14, and each of them has benefited from our little flock. Not only have they been wonderful and low-maintenance pets, but a great learning opportunity for our kids. They have learned about the responsibility of caring for our girls' health, their food and water, and bringing in the eggs. They also had input on the design of our coop and run and helped build it with my husband. Our family has always been close, but the chickens give us another way to learn, teach, and grow together. We would love to be able to add 2 additional birds to our happy flock. Thank you for bringing this forward at the council meeting tonight and for supporting chickens in Littleton. Sincerely, Anna Stewart and family.
Okay, now close the public hearing. I need a motion.
I'll move that the ordinance amending Littleton City Code Section 10-4-4 Sub B 2.5 pertaining to the maximum number of chicken hens permitted in the R1, R2, R3, and RE zone districts be approved on first reading. Public hearing date set for April 17th, 2012.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Jerry, I think you had a question, did you?
Mine has to do with the city financials.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Is there any additional discussion?
And I would say that I did meet in my campaigning somebody who did ask. I met several people who asked, but one swears that he knows how to construct an enclosure that is totally predator-proof, and he would be more than happy to help to instruct anybody else how to do that. This comes apparently after a couple of unsuccessful attempts. So, but I at least wanted to share them.
Any other discussion? Council, you ready to vote? And a yay vote moves it to a second reading.
The vote is 5 in favor, with Mayor Brinkman and Councilmember Cernanik voting no. The motion carries.
Okay. So we will move to 11B. Kirsten? Oh, excuse me.
Get the vote.
This is an ordinance of the City of Littleton, Colorado, amending Title II, Chapter 9, Section 1, concerning the powers and duties of the Planning Commission.
This ordinance shifts approval of a plan development overlay from the Planning Commission to the City Council. After a recommendation by the Planning Commission, PDOs will be established by council ordinance versus a resolution by the Planning Commission. This is also a public hearing on first reading, and we'll hear, Glenn, would you like to make a presentation on this?
Mayor, I think we're talking about the roles and duties of the Planning Commission first.
Okay, so these got mixed up, and
We put in an amended agenda up there. That was one of the things that they
moved C
said.
to B.
Correct.
Oh, I get it. I know what I did. So we're on 11B.
C. Former C, now B.
It says B, that's what we're on, right?
Yes.
It was, if you,
Yeah. It was
Title 2, Chapter
it was
9.
the agenda that had them backwards.
Oh, good grief. Okay, so, Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor. As the council knows, one of your goals is something we take very seriously, and that was initiate a review and update of the city's development and zoning codes to ensure an ability to implement the community's goals. And on February 10th, we did a brief presentation for the council, and I'll just run through that real quickly to give you how we plan on meeting that goal. And the first thing that we wanted to address was how do we make sure that the roles and duties of our various boards and commissions that community development is responsible for, how do we make sure that they're in the right alignment with making sure that the goals of the community get properly implemented. We've talked about the Historical Preservation Board. We spent considerable time with that. I think we've kind of reached a consensus, and you'll be seeing those ordinances fairly quickly. The Board of Adjustment was actually taken care of by our Finance Department, and that was an issue of actually you could appeal your fee to the Board of Adjustment, which really isn't correct when you think a Board of Adjustment is really works on the bulk standards and hearing variances about the development of properties. And then we talked about the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission's roles and duties include the statement that they make and adopt comprehensive plans. In one way, staff presented that perhaps there's not the checks and balances if they're creating a plan and then also approving the plan. But most recently, with the adoption of the downtown neighborhood plan, there was some concern of where, if council could formally approve it with changes. Staff, and including the city attorney, has worked on some language to really lay out, when it comes to a comprehensive plan, what are the options for council's approval, because I guess my feeling is council ought to have some say in the ultimate development of the community. And then also, as a part of the roles and duties that's in our current code, plan development ordinances get final approval by the Planning Commission through adoption of a resolution. And I'll talk more about that in the next agenda item. And we talked about our next goals would be trying to make our processes more logical and defensible. We talked about Development Review Committee and how we can internalize those requirements to make it a little bit more of an expedited process, something that makes a bit more sense. We have some issues with our subdivision code as it addresses redevelopment of a commercial property, just like creating a brand new residential subdivision, and that causes some conflicts. And then finally, we talked about proposed changes to the site development plan and also the issues with development in the downtown. And I think I talked about multiple webs that kind of fall across the downtown area with the TIS district, the PDO district, the downtown district, and the HPBs responsibilities. So what I wanted to do is, council, tell you that we're working on all these things. We felt it was important to bring forward the Planning Commission duties because we have 3 new planning commissioners, potentially going to have we are going to have a new chairman. And we're also starting a big process to amend the comprehensive plan, which is also a goal of council. So we felt it important to bring this forward straight away. And part of that was amending the PDO process. So we're going to present both those to you, and there's going to be some questions because it is a little incomplete at this point. But with that, I would like to just make one recommendation that we look at one change to the draft ordinance that's before you regarding the Planning Commission. We sent this out to the Planning Commission yesterday, and actually our Vice Chair pointed out that in Section 1, under paragraph C1, it talks about approval by the City Council with changes. His question was, well, couldn't council approve it without changes? And that's certainly our goal. So what we are recommending is that we add the 2 words, if any, at the end of that sentence.
Give us a line number reference, please.
18.
18 on page 2.
Correct.
I thought you said section 1.
He did, but it's way down in here. He meant this.
And with that, Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Jim?
Because the only comprehensive plan revision we have done has been the downtown plan, and when that plan was presented to City Council, we made a number of suggested changes to that plan. So that process would continue to work for future comprehensive plans, and if that came about, then it would be sending it back to the commission with our recommendations if the changes that council made passed a majority of the council. Is that the way this will work?
Per the proposed ordinance, what you could do is actually council could adopt it with the changes and not necessarily remand it back to the Planning Commission.
But I'm talking specifically about the comp plan, which is the first reference that you made, and you gave us 3 options there. We could either approve it, or we could deny it, or we can send it back to the Planning Commission. So under the one example that we've had, where there were a number of changes made to the downtown comp plan, the proper scope could still do that. Those changes passed on a majority vote of the council. That the proper way to do that would be to send it back to the Planning Commission with those as recommended changes? Or do we say, thank you, Planning Commission, but here's what we're going to do, and we'll approve it without going back to the Planning Commission?
The proposed ordinance would allow you to do that, yes, sir. Whereas before, you remanded it back to the Planning Commission, they made changes and forward another recommendation back to you of which you adopted. And I don't believe we had any changes to that subsequent recommendation.
Mayor, I think, if I may, just to expand on Glenn's comment to Councilman Taylor, I think this creates, if I'm understanding your question, Councilmember, this creates the greatest amount of flexibility because you can do any of your suggestions. It would be the policy decision by the council seated at that time on how they wanted to handle the plan before them.
Except for clarification, was it you and the mayor, maybe somebody else also meet, when that was remanded, meet with some people from the Planning Commission?
We did.
Right?
Yes.
So does that allow that here, or?
Certainly, because the intent of that meeting was to sit down with the chair and the vice chair of the Planning Commission and figure out what actual words we could put on that address the council's concern and the Planning Commission's concern, how to get the yes.
As long as that allows that, because I
Certainly.
thought that was helpful.
I think one thing maybe I could add to Councilmember Taylor's question. In the old scenario, perhaps you remand it back to the Planning Commission with a number of changes, and the Planning Commission wouldn't necessarily have to approve those changes. So then perhaps council wouldn't adopt the plan, and then we just kind of have this languishing document out there. So I think the one advantage here is it does allow the council to bring closure to a project or to a comprehensive plan.
Phil?
Glenn, just real quick, okay, here's what I understand, and you can tell me whether I've got it correctly or not, which is the Planning Commission does all the debate, analysis work with the staff, develops a recommended adjustment, amendment to the comprehensive plan. That then comes to council for possible final approval. That can then be treated in three different ways. One is the council can approve it without changes, or the council could make changes and then pass that. The council could say, hey, not enough work done, just send it back. The council could then also send it back with some requested changes to be made.
Correct.
Is that
or
right?
you could deny.
Well, that's why I said they could just send it back, deny it, forget it, doesn't work. It does not, and as I read this, does not change that development or guidelines are the purview of the commission, and the commission would still be in a position to develop those design guidelines.
Correct, yes. The only changes we're proposing here is an adoption of a comprehensive plan and the plan development overlay. Those are the only two changes.
We're taking them one at a time, so.
Correct.
This one's dealing with the comprehensive plan. Okay, thank you.
Bruce?
Glenn, if the choice of those options is that council wants to approve the plan with some changes and they want to vote on it immediately, where does public hearing fall into consideration of those changes?
Those would occur in a public hearing. Correct? Yes.
Okay.
First and second reading.
Yeah. And we'd have a first and second reading. So the changes, we're not shortcutting any opportunity for the public to be involved in changes because we would still have to have a second reading.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions? Peggy?
In the section C, the main part of section C, I know it says in line 14, for example, includes, for example, land use, streets and transportation, parks and open space, pedestrian circulation, etc. Would it, given how much attention we're paying to bicyclists, would it be good to include bicycle circulation or whatever the term might be?
Councilmember Cole, I think we would consider that under transportation. And I think this is really kind of geared towards the enabling legislation from the state.
Okay.
I think it's broad enough that we would consider bicycle circulation.
Recreational cycling would still be a transportation.
In my mind, it would.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure on that. And then line 15 in there, urban design such as comprehensive plans, et cetera, and urban design.
There's a period there.
Yeah, I just saw that, sorry, when I kept reading. How does that mesh with the open space task force recommendations and so forth? Because the part I didn't start back soon enough with the parks and open space and so forth. How does that mesh with what council's doing with parks, with the open space and parks task force?
I think that's just a way of how you implement your comprehensive plan, of which you would have goals and objectives under parks and open space. But the Open Space Committee and the purchase of open space is just a way how you implement your comprehensive plan.
Okay, I mean, since we haven't really had these working together yet, so, okay. Then in D, development guidelines, how does that mesh with the guidelines that relate to the historic preservation guidelines and the downtown guidelines?
Right, yeah, and actually, Planning Commission will review those, and I believe they make the final recommendation on those.
So they review the HPB guidelines?
I believe they will, yes.
They haven't right now.
They have not yet. no.
Okay, so you're seeing that this then would pull those through them somehow.
Yeah, and that's really, we haven't changed any of this language. I know it's shown in bold, but that's really right out of the code right now. But there are sections of the code that do say the Planning Commission will look at all design guidelines. We've interpreted that as even the HVB guidelines. But we are looking at all the codes, so, but today, the Planning Commission would approve those design guidelines.
Okay. Because when I was liaison for 2 years to HPB, I don't remember any references to that, but it may be just because of the, where those were developed in terms of probably before I was on that, and so it just never came up for discussion. So as long as somebody's keeping track of what has to go over there.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just when is the next Planning Commission meeting?
It will be next Monday night.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, I will open the public hearing. If anybody in the audience would like to come down and address this issue, you're welcome to do so now. Seeing, come on down.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Craig Coronado, 7157 South Tacoma Street, and I'm a member of the Planning Commission. And there are two aspects of this resolution that I'd like to address. First, as a planning commissioner, to state that representing my fellow commissioners as well, that we're very excited to work with council and the city on the update of the comp plan. It was one of the outcomes, priorities of the downtown area plan, as you know, and I think broadly I can express that we're very excited that that's moving forward. Second, as an individual not representing the commissioners, we just did have a chance to see this resolution, as Glenn mentioned, within the last couple days, and our only concern, or my only concern, is that it attempts to address the issues that we had last time in forwarding it to the council and then getting a lot of detailed input and feedback and some confusion, I think frustration on parts of the commission in going through a 3 or 4 year process and then having some of the goals and policies recommendations questioned at that level of detail. This resolution seems to try to address that by talking about the council's role in the process, whereas it's really the resolution, I think, is intended to address the duties and powers of the Planning Commission. So, as Glenn mentioned, it's establishing 3 or 4 different options that City Council can do to approve or adopt the master plan, whereas it seems that those should go into a definition of the duties and powers of council, not necessarily Planning Commission. So that's just personal opinion. I think it's a step in the right direction, and as long as it provides clarity in how Planning Commission interacts with council and communicates with council through the comp plan process, I think it's a positive. So, thank you.
Thank you, Craig. To that point, Kirsten, is there what Craig's referring to makes good sense? Is there a place where it gets followed up in terms of council role and responsibility?
We can certainly take a look at that. I don't know where it would be in the code. Do you have any idea? We'll go back and look at that. It definitely fits here, but maybe there's another place that we should look at. We're trying to do all of it comprehensively, but it's difficult because the code has been changed piecemeal over the years. So we will make sure that we go back and follow up on that.
Thank you.
Well, clarification, so will you be trying to get that sorted out before the second reading on this?
Yes.
Thank you.
If there's any place to add it, we'll look at it before second reading and have information for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Or, excuse me, anybody else want to come down and speak at this point? Okay, I'll close the public hearing, and I need a motion.
Madam President, I move that the council approve on first reading the proposed ordinance amending Littleton City Code Title II, Chapter 9, related to the powers and duties of the Planning Commission with respect recommended changes to the comprehensive plan, with a change on line 18 adding the words, if any, and that second reading occur on April 17th, and the footnote is this is after the Planning Commission has an opportunity to meet.
Need a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Okay. Item 11C. Thank you. Kirsten?
This is an ordinance of the City of Littleton, Colorado, amending Title 10, Chapters 1, 2, and 9 concerning the process for approval of a planned development overlay.
Okay, I've already said my piece 20 minutes ago. Glenn?
Again, I've
No, not at all.
kind of laid out for the council why we're looking at this initial amendment to the planned development overlay. But there's also goals in the downtown neighborhood plan beyond what council's goals were that talks about a coordinated process. Staff made a presentation that the PDO is very similar to the planned development commercial district, industrial district, so they should have similar processes. Our other concern is that PDO is modifying a lot of the standards that are typically known as zoning. In fact, I think there's a potential for flexibility and amending such things as setbacks, heights, intensity of commercial uses, floor area ratios. The only thing the PDO does not do is change the underlying uses of the zoning district that it's covering. But other than that, it's very similar to a planned development a zoning case, and it's staff's opinion that, again, getting back to a logical, defensible zoning, that PDO is zoning and it should be adopted by council by ordinance. So that's the reason why we're bringing this forward to you today. Also, we are looking at other changes, and another reason you're seeing it tonight is because the Planning Commission roles and duties specifically talk about adopting a plan development overlay. We did present this to the Planning Commission. They had a number of concerns, in fact recommended denial of the proposed ordinance by a vote of 3-4. I think we heard about it. I think some of the Planning Commission felt that they're seeing an incomplete picture. We did talk about trying to make the process more logical. In essence, this initial change adds time to the process because they will have to go before you and have 2 public hearings for first and second adoption of an ordinance for a planned development overlay. And I guess the best we can do is we know what our goals are, and we are going to amend the other processes. One of the things that really kicks in the requirement for a planned development overlay is the fact that we have a transit impact zone that covers most of the downtown, and that automatically requires a PDO whether it's needed or not. We kind of wrestle with the fact if somebody wants to do an addition to their project, they meet all the underlying zoning requirements, but we have this TIS that requires hearings before the Planning Commission and going through this whole process. So believe me, that's a target, and I think as we get through all the changes, it will make more sense, and it won't be as this initial increase in time will go away. Please trust me on that. The Planning Commission also had a concern that they believe that the PDO is not a plan development. It's a unique animal. It doesn't go as far as the plan development. So the fact that it is a kind of a truncated process and adopted by resolution, that should be okay. But I think our feeling with, and I'll lean over to Kirsten as well, I think we feel more confident with it coming before the council and getting adopted by ordinance. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Jim?
Glenn, on the ordinance itself, on page 2, the second page, very top paragraph there, under sub A, it says that an application for a PDO shall be approved by the City Council before obtaining a certificate of appropriateness from the Historical Preservation Board. To me, that's backwards. Because if it comes to the council and we approve that, and then it goes to the HPB and they don't approve it, where does that leave the property owner? They've got one approval from the ruling body that says yes. They got another one from another board that says no. Where does that put you? If that word before was changed to after, so that the certificate of appropriateness was first before it came to council, then we'd have all of our advisory committee boards giving us input before we made a final decision.
Councilmember, yes, that's a tough call, and I hate to refer to chicken and egg. I'm not sure which comes first. I think from staff's standpoint, if somebody needs to increase the coverage of the project, maybe increase the height, reduce parking, if that ultimately isn't approved, they don't have a project to get a certificate of appropriateness for. So that's kind of why we put the PDO first, and this is actually a good example of how onerous the process is, because it actually talks about before you even go to HPB for a certificate of appropriateness, they review the project initially just to give Planning Commission some design architectural review comments. Then it will go to Planning Commission, then it will go to City Council, and as you know, you have 2 hearings, and then they go back to HPB and get a certificate of appropriateness. So we are hoping to untangle a little bit of this, but I guess in the level of seniority, I would put you have to get that PDO and you have to get the absolute parameters of what you can develop before you spend architectural dollars on the design of a facade and getting a certificate of appropriateness approved. I guess that would be my feeling, that it should be PDO and then COA.
Could I just, on that little piece, why couldn't we say City Council contingent upon obtaining? Then it's paired up. Does it, because our approval would be, or contingent upon subsequently obtaining, but something that,
You could certainly have
because in
condition.
one sense, if they don't get the certificate of appropriateness, they can appeal to us. I think.
I don't believe so. A certificate of appropriateness appeal, that would go.
I thought,
Right now, the COAs go to the City Council, sorry. Is that what you're asking?
They don't go to district court.
I thought we were
Eventually, they would end up in district court.
Okay.
If they appeal, they appeal.
Bill?
Glenn helped me and make sure that I at least understand some of what we're trying to do and make some requests to understand this a little bit more. What essentially we're doing, one is to move it from a resolution of the Planning Commission to an ordinance level, that PDO, and that's coming in part from the City Attorney's Office saying, hey, that gives us a more defensible position on a PDO determination. Correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
I did have a question like Jim's. PDO goes through the Planning Commission and then comes to the council with a recommendation. couldn't it also, having sat through historic preservation and the reliance that a property owner may have on a certificate of appropriateness, at least look to the Historic Preservation Board in this subsection 2A, the reference there on the top of page 2. Couldn't we be looking for a recommendation from the Historic Preservation Board, recognizing the certificate of appropriateness is kind of like your permit?
Correct, yeah. And actually, the way the process set up now is they would look at it initially, not with the goal of approving a COA, and pass those recommendations on to Planning Commission, which then would come to you. So that's how the process is set up today. So you would see initial recommendations.
So I'd be looking at that. And the other is somewhere along the line, I know that Jan's worked on flow charts for this, would like to see what the existing flow chart is and what the changed flow chart is and the decision points, and might insert into her flow chart process those decision points by diamonds or quadrilaterals that are not squares in that, so that we can see what's a yes or a no, or what comes forward as with a recommendation and that determination and how that can occur. But I think what I've said so far is, you think I got an understanding?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, our goal is to make it a better process than the way it is today. But we understand you want to see what it is today, what the rules are.
Bruce?
Glenn, I guess, it's sort of, I guess I'm sympathetic with the Planning Commission in terms of the trying to get the context, the big picture of this whole thing in order to figure out how this fits. But when it talks about in Section 3, subsection 1, the application for a plan development overlay is submitted for review and approval pursuant to the provisions of this chapter following a duly advertised public hearing. Is the intent there that public, maybe this is what you said, so essentially the process is there's how many public hearings with the Planning Commission, and at least, and certainly 2 with City Council. So a minimum of 3, maybe 4?
Minimum 3.
Okay, so the expectation is essentially the same level of detail would be covered. I guess I'm sort of thinking about, didn't we do this with like that Richmond development at over by Winnetka? When they came in, didn't they go through multiple iterations of changing the design as each group? Yeah, Planning Commission gave input, and then Council gave input, and it changed some more, and it changed again. Is that sort of your vision of how this thing's going to work?
Well, I would hope that we'd only need one hearing with the Planning Commission. They would get enough information that they can make a recommendation, and then Council goes through the first and second reading.
Okay, but assume for the sake of an argument that it starts changing. So assume Planning Commission. I don't think it doesn't sound unreasonable to me that Planning Commission could get a PDO plan and want to make changes to it. So then they'd have to come back to Planning Commission.
Correct.
And then, it doesn't sound unreasonable for the sake of an argument either that Council would want to tweak. At which point in time, what? Then they have to go back to Planning Commission?
It'd just be like any other zoning case. The Planning Commission may go through a couple of hearings in order to get to a point where they can make a recommendation to you. Council could do the same thing, but it isn't any different than any rezoning you might see.
Well,
PDO is kind of unique in that it stops at Planning Commission.
And I understand what you're saying about, Council having more or less the final say, but it sounds to me, I don't know, I'm scuffling with we've sort of talked for the past 6 months about delayering. I'm not seeing how this accomplishes that overtly. Can you help me understand, in the grand scheme of things, when you guys get through this, how you think it will?
Well, I'll give you one example. One of the things, and we talked about the downtown. In the downtown, you have a TIS requirement that says any development, redevelopment Any kind of impact, you have to do a plan development overlay. What we found is that if it meets the underlying zoning, why just force this public process on of the PDO? So that is like target number one for us. We don't think that's necessary. I think the purpose of the TIS was the concern of now we have a transit stop, we're going to have wholesale redevelopment for surface parking lots, and that would be bad. So we don't want to lose a chance at looking at that. But what it also has kind of taken in is even the projects that want to meet our zoning and develop according to their property rights per their zoning, they have to go through a public process now with the PDO. So that we think we can tailor back, pull back the TIS that will require a lot fewer PDO cases coming forward.
That works if you're only talking about PDOs. I mean, there's only 2 TIS areas in the city.
Correct.
And they're 1 mile, how far are they?
It's a mile in diameter.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so, I mean, this is applicable, the likelihood would be there'd be more PDOs elsewhere, like Marathon, like whatever. I mean.
Well, I think primarily the PDO is really a downtown tool because it allows an existing a project with CA zoning to add on height above the minimum. So I think you'll actually, and I'll look to Jan, but I think you'll see the PDO used more often in the downtown area. If you were doing a Marathon, that's a planned development commercial or a planned development residential.
Well, there's one that exists, so if they do another one, you're saying it's just
PDO?
Yeah, I think there's a PDO on that property, isn't it?
I think it's just a planned development, and that's part of the concern. And that is an ordinance, and that requires Planning Commission making a recommendation to you for final adoption. It's only the PDO which allows the PDO goes over an existing zoning and changes the standards.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sympathetic with council being the elected officials having the ultimate say in terms of what in their collective wisdom is in the best interest of the community with a particular project. The utilization of Planning Commission with a higher depth of understanding of some of these issues, should carry a lot of weight. So I'm sort of on the fence just in terms of going back and forth on this. So I'll leave it there.
Jerry.
Cool. Thank you. Going forward, I'm hoping that we can have some improved communication between City Council and Planning Commission, and you'll play a big part in that, no doubt. I think with the new Planning Commission on board at the next meeting, is it?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I think some of the individuals that are going to be on there are going to be very helpful for that as well. I'm concerned that the Planning Commission has issues with both ordinances. I would like for the Planning Commission to feel comfortable with the proposed changes. I'm not saying the changes are wrong, but I would like for them to understand it, because I rely on the city staff to make reasonable recommendations, and it sounds reasonable to me. But I also rely on Planning Commission to study these things where maybe I can't. I know when I was on Planning Commission, we certainly dove into these things. And so when they come with a recommendation, and it's valuable to me. And if they're not comfortable with this for some reason, I'd like to know why. And it may be that TIS is the real issue here. TIS may be the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody recently said that city councilmen and women don't know anything about planning. I full-heartedly disagree with that. I think Bruce has been around the city for more than 30 years, and Jim has been around forever and a day. And I did the Planning Commission thing for more than 12 years. So I understand what the Planning Commission is trying to do and their concerns a little bit. So I would hope that over the next week or two, there can be some sort of a mutual feeling of agreement on these things. I don't like the idea of saying, let's just do this because the city says this and we're all for it, but our planning commissioners aren't comfortable with it. So we got to figure out something there. That is it.
Bruce?
And if I could just jump on the one idea that was expressed is service to the community being the ultimate goal of this, and the idea that we can delayer or we can make a process quicker for a potential developer or homeowner or whoever, I'm all for that. And it would be more powerful to the argument if you could come back and say that along the lines of the decision tree or whatever, this is what we have, this is what we're going to change, and here's the benefit. And the benefit reflects an add-on value for the citizen. I think that would be very helpful to the argument.
Yeah, if we're talking a look at, what are developers or folks looking to do, is to have some element of predictability in the process, and I'm not sure how we've gotten to that with this yet. It may be there, it may be under the covers somewhere, but it doesn't come out emblazoned yet.
Peggy?
Yeah, and I'm quite sympathetic with the Planning Commission wanting to see much more at a time, if not everything, much more, so that the little piecemeal part is not there. Anyway, so I'm not comfortable with this, even for the best intentions, to do the piecemeal, so much piecemeal.
Glenn, is it possible to go back and give us a bigger picture on this? Because I think there's concern from the Planning Commission on it, and Council clearly is showing some concern in terms of what you're trying to do here, maybe exactly what needs to be done, but it's not fitting in my head that it's what we need to do right now based on what I don't know what's coming next. And when you talk about layers and making it more difficult and the number of things that what this adds to an applicant, I mean, seriously, if we got someone in here, or even 2 or 3 of them, before we got this cleaned up, what would happen to them? And that is not very friendly. So right. I don't know if there's a way that we can make this either move slower or move faster or move in a different order in order to be able to make it more palatable. Because I don't think the end goal is wrong. I think where you're headed is there. But
you're not seeing the entire picture. I understand.
Yeah, and kind of a timeline for it too, because to say that those things are going to get done, if we're sitting here a year from now finally cleaning them up after we've got 5 or 6 applicants that were working on this that are just pulling their hair out over it, that's not what any of us want to see happen.
I guess that's part of the question is the staff aware of PDO requests that are like on our doorstep?
No.
Mayor, if I may add in here a little bit, I think one of the reasons we brought this forward was we did feel like that this is a unique circumstance, unlike, for example, DRC changes that we're making, because we did really see this as a zoning component, and we're coming forward with the belief that zoning is legislative in nature and should be addressed by the elected body, the council. The only concern that I've heard tonight really around the process is with the TIS zones. And so if there's some direction that the council would have between first and second reading that would allay some of those concerns, we certainly could look at that. We may need to defer the second reading depending upon what those directions are. But I think I just want to make sure there's not dots being connected to other parts of the process that aren't related to the PDO component of it, because the DRC does have its fingers in a lot of different sections of the code, and we're currently working on that one, but this is specifically around that PDO. And I think the question that was initiated by Councilmember Taylor about what is the appropriate process is a perfectly appropriate debate that you guys have been kind of grappling around. But I just want to make sure we're not making it bigger than it is, because there aren't other components tied to this one. And again, it's primarily because we saw it as a zoning component. You are PDOs amend the zoning, if you will, and so legislative action was our intent and approach here.
If the TIS is really the 95% of the issue on this, then I would suggest if you could come back before second, or at second, with the plan to attack that.
Okay.
With that, Council, are we, Bruce?
Well, yeah, and I guess I definitely agree with that, but the multiple layers of, I don't know, maybe I'm just confused on exactly how this whole thing's fitting together, and I got to have a better understanding. I understand what you're saying, Michael, and I don't disagree, you know, that the ordinance-driven zoning changes, totally on board with that, but maybe it's what Debbie said. I'm not conceptualizing how this thing fits in with a streamlined process in order to make it simpler for somebody to navigate from point A to point Z.
I think one of the, listening to the conversation, if I may, is to an extent, this may not be a good example of that, because it is, as we've presented it, we're proposing that it become a legislative action by the council. That adds a layer. So this may not be an example of streamline. That does not mean that the actions that we're taking, looking at DRC and all of that is in there, because if you go through the 3 iterations of historic preservation, the planning commission, and then it ultimately comes to you, every one of those can have their own evolution in there. But because it is essentially, again, from our view, a zoning amendment, we think that part of that warrants that heavy public debate and comment by your advisory boards, ultimately landing with you. So
I think when we present,
press pause on the efficiency of this.
and we talk about
go ahead.
making the processes logical and defensible, and this would fall in the defensible end, I guess.
Okay. Any more questions, Council?
So what are you then what would this thing, then what are you going to do to come back with this thing on second reading?
Well, I think what I've heard is the actual duties of the Planning Commission did not go formally to the Planning Commission because that's not from the zoning code. And I think maybe I heard that perhaps you'd like input from the Planning Commission on that. So we would present that to Planning Commission next Monday night. And then we'll at least dig into the TIS district and how we would propose extracting that would ultimately reduce the time for a PDO in the downtown.
With the expectation that most of the PDOs are occurring within the TIS.
Right.
Jerry?
I have a question on the process here. I understand this is the first reading, and the second reading is April 17th, something like that.
Which we could move.
We can either vote no to not go to a second reading, and what does that do?
Kills it.
That just plain kills it. Or we vote to extend the date out from April 17.
Yep.
Correct.
When you make when the motion's made, you can change the date on there.
And then that gives you, of course, more time because
It would.
you got a little bit of work to do.
The only complicating factor is the Planning Commission ordinance that you just passed on first reading will come up on the 17th, where we're changing the rules as far as the PDO, taking that out from their roles and responsibilities for final approval.
I think we do have a process where we can go back and review what we just voted on in the same meeting, though.
Or perhaps you continue it at the 17th.
Are you okay with it? Will you be ready on the 17th?
At least from the TIS, I think we can talk about concepts.
Okay. Bill?
Well, I was going to suggest, let's see, I was going to move that we take up amending Littleton City Code Title 10, Chapters 1, 2, and 9 related to the process.
We have to, before you make a motion, we still have a public hearing to have. So write down your thoughts, please.
Well,
Well, write down your motion.
Well, what I was going to do is table it. That's why I was going to table it till the 17th.
Okay, but we have a public hearing first.
Okay.
Peggy?
I was going to make offer another suggestion, too, of how to proceed. We could postpone this to give time to get the other, so that we wouldn't take action on first reading, but could work on amendments that you might bring to this.
Okay, why don't we move this discussion to discussion, and Jim?
Well, it seems like that there's a very logical progression being presented, of which 2 weeks from tonight there will be a public hearing of which there's a possibility that the public would like to come in and speak. It would seem to me it would behoove us to pass this on first reading and see what comes up 2 weeks from tonight. And then if we want to postpone it, we can postpone it. If we want to delay it, if we want to kill it, whatever, but at least get us to the second hearing so that the public has a chance to speak. And if you kill it tonight, if you postpone it tonight, we don't know what's happening. We don't know where to go because we don't have any input from anybody other than the few people who are sitting up here and who may get up and speak here in a few moments. But it seems to me the thing to do is to pass it on first reading, move it to second reading. We've got all kinds of choices we can do in second reading.
We still have the same choices.
We have the same choices, but don't kill it tonight.
Okay, so any other questions? Then let's open it to the public hearing. If anybody would like to come down and say anything at this time, please do so. Come on down.
Craig Coronado again. I think Glenn did a very good job of describing the Planning Commission's concerns about this, and I won't repeat them. One was really about the context, understanding how this fits within the context. The second had to do with the additional time required to go through the process for a development proposal. The third was I guess not a real clear understanding of the difference between a PDO and a PD as far as its legislative, rising to a legislative level in terms of rezoning. When a PD is applied to a property, the PD becomes the zone district for that property, whereas a PDO is still an overlay over the underlying zone. So there's a distinction there that I don't think we really understood. And it was a split vote. It was close. And then the fourth item, which I don't think Glenn did reflect in our discussion, was the ability to appeal. The way it's set up now, where the Planning Commission does create the resolution for a PDO, it can be appealed by the developer to council. Now, if council is the ultimate approver of that, the next level of appeal then I guess is district court. So it pushes it up a level in terms of appeals. I'm not sure if we've ever seen that in the city, but it's something else to think about and maybe could be addressed in second reading. But otherwise, I think all the items were well reflected by Glenn's discussion. So, thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Anybody else? Okay, I'll close the public hearing, and I need a motion. Phil, you ready to try one?
Well, after hearing some discussion, I'll take the opportunity to move the ordinance amending Littleton City Code Title 10, Chapters 1, 2, and 9, related to the process for approval of a planned development overlay be approved on first reading, and that the public hearing be set for April 17th, with the footnote that there's a fair amount of staff work to provide some clarity, and that April 17th is after the next Planning Commission meeting as well.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to move to a second reading on April 17th. Everybody ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Okay. Okay, we have no resolutions, and we do have an executive session. Bruce?
And I have one question I want to get to.
Okay, before we do that, Jerry has a question.
And this is for Michael. Looking at the financials, and I know our financial director's not here tonight, but looking at the financials, especially on page 13, when I look at the changes and the general fund expenditures and the percentages of increases and stuff, I guess maybe it's because I'm missing something here. I find them kind of alarming when I see things that have increased, over 200% or.
Can you point out an example, please?
Well, one would be soon would be miscellaneous benefits.
Miscellaneous benefits. Oh.
And maybe and if Doug was here, maybe he would be able to clarify this for me. But there's just, as I go down this, I have many of them check marked.
Okay.
Business meetings, 262% increase. I just don't understand
What
this.
page are you on, Jerry?
Page 13.
Thank you.
Well, you can do this.
Yeah, maybe if you can, I'll meet with you at the end, and you can give me those, and we can get a response out to the full council.
An email?
Yeah,
Email
yeah, if
suffice?
you want to do that, or
Okay.
if you just,
Okay,
we can
cool.
spend a few minutes, because I can probably identify some of them, but it'd probably be easier and more comprehensive.
Yeah, I don't want to take
just
time up.
get
I
it.
just want to.
Beautiful. I'm happy to respond.
Thank you.
Okay. Bruce?
I move that City Council convene to conduct an executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute, Section 24-6-402, Sub 4, Sub E, for purposes of discussing negotiating strategies for open space land acquisitions. And this would require City Council, City Manager Penny, and City Attorney Crawford be present.
And Director
And
Boston.
Charlie Bloston, Public Services Director.
Okay, I need a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go into an exec. We need 5 votes.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
We will not be conducting any business after the executive session. Okay, can't adjourn this meeting.
We are.
I'm learning.
That's right. Yeah.
Can't learn.
Zip it before you say it.
Yep.